Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Nero Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. Shall we begin? Nero Wolfe and the typewriter in the attic. Tuesday was slow from the start. Fritz was in the kitchen early, the scent of corned beef hash floating through the air vents before Wolfe even stirred. I'd been at my desk since 9, sorting expense receipts that refused to sort themselves, and sipping coffee that needed stronger allies than cream. The brownstone held its usual hush. Wolfe had taken to his orchids at 8, which meant I had until 11 to poke a stick at the world before he emerged to poke a larger one at me. The doorbell rang at exactly 10. I waited 5 seconds. Fritz, God bless him, never moved toward the front door. Wolfe's rules were iron. I tossed the receipts aside and went to answer it. The woman standing there had the look of someone who had knocked too softly the first time, late 30s maybe, with a pale face and dark auburn hair pinned back like a schoolmarm's. She wore a tan trench coat that didn't look cheap, and she clutched a manila envelope as though it might float away. "Miss Delia Hartley," she said before I could ask. Her voice had the clipped tone of someone who practiced it in the mirror and forgot how nervous she'd be saying it aloud. I was told, "Mr. Wolfe sees clients at home?" I opened the door wider. "He does, if you don't expect him to be charming before lunch. Come in." She stepped across the threshold like the tile might bite. I led her to the front room, gesturing toward one of the red chairs. She didn't sit. "May I speak to him?" she asked. "You may, though he's currently in sacred communion with 1,000 orchids. It may be a minute." I crossed to the office door, tapped twice, and opened it 2 inches. "Client." His reply drifted through the gap. "Then see her." I stepped back and raised an eyebrow at her. "That's as good a welcome as anyone gets." She sat down, smoothing her skirt over her knees with both hands. She laid the manila envelope in her lap, but didn't open it. "It's about a letter," she said. I nodded, taking a seat across from her. "A letter you received?" "No. One I found, in my uncle's attic, after he passed." Her words came carefully, not like someone guarding a secret, more like someone afraid the room might disagree with her. "And this letter, is it dangerous? Or just peculiar?" "I think it may be both." I leaned forward. Her hands tightened around the envelope, thumb pressing against the flap. "It mentions a man named Oliver Vendramini," she said. "He disappeared 10 years ago." I knew the name. Editorial board of the Civic Guardian, back when people still read it. Disappeared without a trace, some whispered scandal, no body, no goodbye. And the letter connects him to what? She looked down at her lap, then back up at me. To a suicide. And possibly something worse. I didn't respond right away. It wasn't the kind of thing you jumped on with a, "Go on." Her eyes had shifted, like someone watching a storm from behind glass. I gave her the space. After a moment, she opened the envelope, carefully. Inside was a single typewritten page, yellowed at the corners, creased 3 times. She passed it to me with both hands. I read it. It wasn't long, 2 paragraphs and a closing line. No signature. But the type had character, slightly misaligned E's, faint ink on the top line. A spacebar that left uneven gaps between words. A real machine's work, not a printing press. It named a city clerk who had died in 1938, presumed suicide. It suggested that Vendramini wasn't suicide at all. "Where'd you say you found this?" "In my uncle's attic, folded inside a ledger." Was he involved? He was a janitor. At the borough offices. That narrowed it. Borough clerks, basement ledgers, lost editors. Not exactly Wolfe's preferred fare. He liked crimes with shape, not echoes. Still, the page in my hand had weight. "Did anyone else see this?" She hesitated. "No, but someone's been in the attic, since I found the letter, 2 nights ago." She didn't elaborate. I didn't ask. Not yet. I stood. "Come meet Mr. Wolfe." She looked startled. "Now? There's no better moment. You brought ghosts to the brownstone. Might as well introduce them." She followed me to the office. I knocked once, opened the door, and gestured. "Delia Hartley to see you, sir." Wolfe was at his desk. He didn't rise. He never did. He looked her over, eyes narrowing the way they did when something smelled like effort. She stepped in, stiff-backed, still holding the empty envelope. Wolfe gestured to the red chair across from him. "Sit." She did. "Archie says you have a letter," he said. She nodded and passed it to me. I gave it to Wolfe, who read slowly, brow furrowing by millimeters. When he finished, he looked at her again. "You believe this document is genuine?" "I do." "And you suspect someone does not want it to be found?" "I do." He closed his eyes for a second. "I despise letters," he said. "They're cowardly things. They speak without presence." He looked at me. "Find out who had access to that attic." And whether Vendramini truly disappeared, he did, I said, without fanfare. Wolfe snorted. Then it is our business to uncover whether he vanished with cause, or by design. He passed the letter back to her. Miss Hartley, I will take this matter, with conditions. Her voice was a whisper. Yes, you are not to speak to anyone about this. Not police, not friends, not librarians, she nodded, tight. He leaned back. Archie will begin today. He reached for the bell to summon Fritz. I will begin after lunch, I smiled. We had a case. And Wolfe. He had another excuse to avoid attics. Wolfe held the letter flat on his desk, one palm resting at its corner, as if to prevent it from escaping. His eyes scanned each line with that slow, deliberate contempt he reserved for written drama. I stood by the globe, watching him not read it so much as inhale its intent. Delia sat rigid in the red chair. Her hands remained folded in her lap, the knuckles white. Fritz had brought her tea, which cooled untouched on the side table. Typed on an Olivetti Studio 42, she said, voice just above a whisper. Wolfe didn't look up. I believe so. My uncle worked at the borough offices before the war, maintenance. She hesitated. The typewriter was in a locked trunk in the attic. I only found it 2 weeks ago, after the funeral. I crossed to the window and tilted the blind. The sun was fading behind the rooftops, softening the long shadows in the room. The kind of light that makes things feel remembered, not seen. Wolfe tapped the edge of the paper once. You are aware this letter is unsigned? Yes. No heading. No addressee. I know. No proof it was written by Mr. Vendramini. She swallowed. I understand. He looked at her now. His gaze was not hostile, only heavy. You still wish to pursue this? Delia straightened her back. The letter refers to James Crenshaw. He was a city clerk. Died in 38. Suicide, they said. But the letter... Wolfe raised a hand. Yes, the letter states the man was silenced, that he had planned to report fraud. He shifted his weight in the chair, which creaked like it had opinions. Vendramini's name appears only once. Not in the body, merely as a witness. It's the first link I've found. Wolfe pressed 2 fingers to his brow. You are a librarian, Miss Hartley? I am. Then you will appreciate my concern for sources. I stepped forward and held out my hand. May I? Wolfe passed the letter without ceremony. The paper was cream-colored, brittle at the edges. The typing had the subtle imperfections of real ink. A slight tilt on the G, a faint smudge on the Q. The top margin was narrow, the kind of things you notice if you've ever sat in a room watching secrets get written. I read it twice. It was blunt. James Crenshaw had gathered records of city funds diverted to a private trust. He'd confronted someone, unnamed. 2 weeks later, he fell from a window. The letter said Vendramini had urged Crenshaw to wait, to go public. The last line read, if anything happens to me, this letter must be preserved. That was all. No names, just fear. I handed it back to Wolfe. I'd say whoever wrote it wanted to be remembered. He nodded faintly. Or, he said, they wanted to be believed without risk. Delia's voice broke the pause. There's something else. She reached into her bag. She pulled out a folded sheet of tracing paper. Unfolded, it revealed a carbon impression, faint but legible. The same letter, same phrasing. Slightly blurred at the bottom, as if pressed in haste. My uncle had made a copy. Probably by accident. She set it beside the original. I leaned in. The spacing matched. The blot on the Q was there, but the G wasn't tilted. Different machine? I asked. She shook her head. Same, but I think someone retyped the final version. Wolfe gave a quiet grunt, not approval, not dismissal. Intrigue. He gestured to me. Archie, you'll examine the ribbon. Note the font pressure, serial key impressions, spacing width. I'll need the machine. You'll retrieve it from her home. Delia's fingers tightened. That's the problem, it's missing. Wolfe turned to her, frowning. It was there when I found the letter, she continued. 2 nights ago, the attic was broken into. The trunk had been forced. No police? I didn't know what to tell them. Just a missing typewriter? Wolfe let out a low breath through his nose. The lack of intervention may prove useful. I said, this letter. Who else knows it exists? No one, she said. Just you. That, at least, made things easier. Wolfe rose, not standing, merely the shift of bulk in the chair, and tapped the original page. Whoever typed this wanted it found, but not too soon. He looked at me. Vendrami's name was Mud by 39. He vanished in March that year, I added. No note, no trace, which gives us 2 ghosts, Crenshaw and Vendramini, and 1 object, now stolen. He shifted his attention back to Delia. Have you told anyone about the attic? Or about us? No, you must not. Not even your colleagues. She nodded once. I understand. Wolfe settled deeper into his chair. Then we begin. He reached for the bell. Fritz arrived silently.
took the letter and carbon copy with white gloves, and departed. I stood with Delia as she prepared to leave. Wolfe had already turned away, his attention drifting toward the orchid schedule on the blotter. She paused at the threshold. "Do you believe it?" she asked. I looked at her. "That a typewriter holds a murder, that it still matters." I opened the door. It mattered enough for someone to steal it. She left with a faint nod. I closed the door, turned back, and caught Wolfe watching me. "You don't think she's imagining it?" he said. "No," I replied. "She's too frightened for fantasy." Wolfe gave a slight grunt and reached for his beer. The glass clinked gently on the coaster. He didn't look up again. Outside, the city breathed on. Inside, we had ghosts, a vanished editor, and an attic no one wanted opened, and a letter typed on a machine someone was willing to steal, or kill, to erase. Wolfe had not moved in 12 minutes. The letter sat where he'd left it, centered, slightly askew, beside the ivory-handled letter opener he never used. The carbon copy lay just beneath it, as though trying to hide. Outside, the light had cooled. Manhattan had begun its evening transformation, horns sharpening, shadows stretching. In the office, only Wolfe's breathing and the soft scrape of... My pencil broke the stillness. He cleared his throat once, loudly. I stopped writing. He did not speak. Then, after a long pause, "I detest ghosts. I've noticed. And suicides. Yes, sir. They're fashionable, tiresome, frequently invented by the living." I leaned back. "You think Crenshaw threw himself from the window for fun?" "I think people believe what spares them guilt." He picked up the letter and let it fall back to the desk. There is no signature, no address. The type is distinctive, but not definitive. "And yet, yes," he said. "And yet." I waited. Wolfe closed his eyes. The light struck his face at an angle that softened nothing. He looked like a man losing an argument with silence. "There is one phrase," he said, "that bothers me." He opened his eyes. "He says, this letter must be preserved." I nodded. "A plea for posterity." "No, a ruse." Wolfe pushed back slightly in his chair. "Preservation is not proof. It is hope." He wanted the illusion of permanence. That is a dangerous motive. He turned his head toward me. But hope, however foolish, is human. And that makes it compelling. I crossed one ankle over the other, meaning, he gestured toward the door. "You will begin with the name. Vendramini. Everything public. Disappearance, last known address, employment records. And the letter. You will not reference it. Not even with the police. Especially not with the police." I smirked. "So, we're in." He sighed. "I will engage this case," he said, "on principle." "Which principle is that?" He pressed his fingertips together. "That if a man vanishes while pointing to a corpse, someone should look twice." He reached for his beer. I stood. "Anything else?" "Yes," he said, without opening his eyes. "You will not use the words attic, trunk, or typewriter in my presence." "Understood. And I do not wish to hear about your climbing, or your sweating. I'll be graceful." "That would be new." I smiled and turned toward the hallway. Behind me, his voice came again. "Be cautious, Archie." I paused. "That's unlike you." He didn't answer. I found Fritz in the hall with a tray, black coffee, sourdough toast, and a small dish of pickled carrots. Wolfe's idea of restraint. "I wouldn't," I said, nodding toward the door. "He's meditating on mortality." Fritz gave the faintest smile. "Then I'll let it steep." I slipped past and grabbed my coat from the rack. The sleeves had worn thin, which felt oddly appropriate. Nothing about this case was thick with substance yet, just ghosts and guilt. Outside, the evening was cold enough to matter. I lit a cigarette under the awning and watched a cab idle by. Across the street, someone turned off a lamp. The window faded to black. Vendramini. The name still had weight, though no one had spoken it in years. He'd been a reformist editor, loud, aggressive, fond of Latin idioms and cheap cigars. Then gone. No body, no farewell, no scandal with teeth, just gone. Now a city clerk with a broken neck and an unsigned letter brought him back, or tried to. I dropped the match and stepped into the sidewalk stream. Vendramini had once called City Hall a nest of termites with fountain pens. His last editorial was a ramble about bureaucratic decay, cut mid-sentence in the final print. Edition. That issue had become a collector's item. Delia's letter might be the missing paragraph. Back in the office, Wolfe was finishing the toast. I returned an hour later with nothing but a name on a door that no longer opened. He looked up as I stepped inside. Well, he lived in the village. Last seen entering his office on March 21st, 1939. No exit? None confirmed. The janitor said he left at midnight, but the janitor was drunk, Wolfe grunted. Reliable as usual. The Civic Guardian closed that same month. Wolfe leaned back and wiped his fingers with a cloth napkin. Who owned? The paper. Vendramini. Technically. Though the funding came from a civic trust. Which trust? That's what I'll find out tomorrow. He nodded. I poured myself a glass of rye and sat across from him. We're doing this then. He looked up. Yes. There was a long pause. You don't believe in hauntings, do you? No, Wolfe said. But you believe in unfinished business. I believe in cowardice, he said. And in fear. He reached for the letter again. And in men who go missing because they speak when others are silent. I nodded. He tapped the paper once, softly. This letter is either the beginning of truth or a very elegant lie. He didn't raise his voice, but either way, it was typed with purpose. The room fell still again. Outside, Manhattan kept grinding on. Inside, a vanished man, a clerk in a grave, and a librarian with nerves had opened a door no one meant to. Revisit. I wrote the date on a fresh page. Then I wrote one name, Vendramini. The apartment was on East 73rd, in a walk-up that had the good manners to creak. Not the polished sort of building with a doorman and brushed brass railings, but the kind of place where the wallpaper changed moods with the weather. 4th floor, rear unit, quiet as an overdue book. Delia opened the door with the chain still on. Her eyes scanned past me, down the hall, then back again before she unlatched it. You came alone. That's how I'm sold. She stepped aside. The place smelled faintly of lemon oil and ink. Books lined the walls. Not the kind for show, but working copies. Dog-eared. Annotated. A librarian's home. Without question. I removed my hat. Would you like tea? I'd like the truth. She led me to a small sitting room. A grey armchair faced a window overlooking the back courtyard. A coal grate had gone cold in the corner. There was no sign of the typewriter. She folded her hands. My uncle kept everything, not just paper, bottles, tags, nails. When he died, I didn't know what I'd find. You said he worked for the borough? He did. From 32 to 41. Maintenance, custodial. They said he was diligent. He never missed a day. She paused. Until he missed every day. I sat down. The chair gave a polite groan beneath me. Breakdown. Yes, in 1941. No diagnosis. Just collapse. Her voice had a steadiness that wasn't natural. It had been built, shelf by shelf. After he passed, I cleared the attic. Behind boxes of oil rags and old garden tools was a trunk. Locked. I nodded. And inside, the typewriter and the letter, folded inside an old payroll ledger. No notebooks? No, just the letter. And she hesitated. There was a second sheet, a partial line, carbon impression, barely readable. Do you still have it? It's in my desk drawer. She didn't rise to fetch it. I think someone wanted that machine. Who? I don't know. But the night after I found it, I heard someone on the roof. I didn't imagine it. She looked toward the window. I found the attic hatch. Open. The trunk had been forced. I hadn't locked it again. I leaned forward slightly. You didn't go to the police. I couldn't explain it. There was nothing missing, at first glance. And I didn't want them taking the typewriter as evidence and losing it in some archive drawer. I studied her a moment. Do you know what kind of risk you're in? She shook her head. I don't know anything. That's what frightens me. I let that hang for a moment. Then I said, what do you think your uncle was doing with that letter? I think, her voice trailed, I think he knew it was dangerous, but not why. She rose and walked to the writing desk beneath the front window, drew the drawer gently, removed a thin folded tissue sheet, handled like it might dissolve if held too tightly. I took it from her. The carbon copy was weak, nearly ghosted, just a few half-formed words. But it matched the tone and spacing of the letter Wolfe had reviewed. Same ink width, same uneven E. Whoever typed the original hadn't just drafted a note. They had meant to leave a record. You said it's gone, I said. The machine, she replied. Yes, I left it upstairs after I called you. When I went back the next morning, it was gone. Locked doors. Yes, but the hatch wasn't sealed. They came from above. I looked toward the ceiling, as if the thief had stayed for tea. Did you tell your building superintendent? She gave a dry smile. Mr. Alonzi doesn't believe in crime above the second floor. I tucked the tissue carefully into its fold and handed it back. I'll need names. People your uncle worked with. Anyone who might have known about the trunk. Anyone who visited since his death. I've kept a list. Good. And Archie? Yes? There's something else. She led me into the hallway, where a folding step stool leaned beside the closet. She opened it and pulled the string to the attic hatch. It lowered. With a thud, dust puffing out like breath from an old lung. You want me to climb that? I'm not asking, she said. I just think you should see it. I climbed. The attic was cramped. Bare beams, cold rafters, and the faint smell of mildew and cotton twine. A bulb dangled from a frayed cord. I pulled it. In the corner, a faint scuff marked the floorboards where the trunk had sat. Next to it, an old shoebox of rusted keys, broken glass from a storm window, a single leather glove. I came back down and handed it to her. This yours? She shook her head. So we had a missing typewriter, a nervous librarian, a vanished uncle with a broken mind, and now a glove. Keep your door locked, I said. I already do. And keep this quiet. She nodded once. Outside, the street was busier now. The light had dipped beneath the rooftops, leaving only window glows and the occasional trumpet of a car horn. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was finishing a slice of beef tongue on toast. He didn't speak until I'd removed my coat. Well, she's scared. He wiped his fingers. And the attic wasn't empty. Someone took the machine, left a glove. Describe it. Men's, leather, worn smooth, right hand. He grunted. Anyone stupid enough to commit burglary without gloves? No. Then it was deliberate. Poured myself a drink. Wolfe set down his fork. Then the letter is not the only thing that Typewriter recorded. I nodded. Or destroyed. The Civic Guardian building had been gutted 3 years ago, replaced by a parking garage with aluminum. Ribs and no memory. I didn't expect ghosts to linger in cement, but you'd be surprised what still echoes through boiler rooms and yellowed clippings. I started with the city archive. Vendramini's name was still on a payroll ledger, dated March 1939, circled in, red pencil. Final paycheck issued the 23rd. After that, nothing. From there, I followed the crumbs. Pension officers, ex-union reps, and finally, a former junior columnist named Morris Elgin, who now sold insurance from a desk inside a fee barbershop on 2nd Avenue. He wore horn-rimmed glasses and a houndstooth vest. His handshake was dry, his smile uncertain. Vendramini? He said, lowering his voice. That's a name I haven't heard in a decade. I gestured to the empty barber's chair. He's still alive? Morris leaned forward. If he is, he isn't Oliver anymore. He pulled a metal tin from his drawer. Cigarettes, Turkish, lit one with a match that burned too close to his knuckle. We all knew he was a fire hazard. Principled, difficult, smart as hell, but paranoid. I said nothing. He ran that paper like it was the Fourth Estate's last stand. Wouldn't publish ad copy. Wouldn't take city money. Wrote 10 editorials a week. Did he make enemies? He didn't make friends. He took a drag and exhaled sideways. He talked too much, but never to the people who could have helped him. I took out a small notepad. What was he working on before he vanished? Morris looked at me. He said it was bigger than Teapot Dome. That caught my attention. The Teapot Dome scandal had taken down a Secretary of the Interior, and that had oil. Morris nodded, said he had paperwork, witnesses, timelines, something about city contracts and fake addresses. He never showed any of it, but he swore it would break wide. And then he disappeared, 2 days after, saying he'd publish. Did anyone see him that day? Morris looked down at his desk. We all saw him. He came in shouting about how it was going to print whether we liked it or not. Then he went quiet. Around 7, he left. Never came. Back. Was there police involvement? Briefly, but no one pushed. No body, no foul. He stubbed out the cigarette. Thing is, I think he knew he wouldn't come back. Why? Morris leaned closer. He cleaned out his drawer. Took nothing but his notes. Not even his flask. I stood. Did you ever see those notes? No one did. I thanked him and left. Back on the sidewalk, I paused beneath a blinking street lamp. Manhattan was indifferent tonight. Cold wind, dry leaves, the smell of someone's burnt dinner drifting from a tenement window. I made a call to Wolfe from a payphone near 69th. He answered on the 3rd ring. He believed he was onto something big, I said. Wolfe's reply was, quiet. Then someone believed it too. I moved west, toward Riverside, to find another name on the list Wolfe had given me. Virginia Holt, former layout editor. She'd worked nights. Still did. I caught her on her dinner break. 3 stories. Up in a walk-up that smelled like radiator steam and yesterday's soup. She wore a mustard cardigan and thick wool socks. Her hair was tied back with a pen. The apartment was clean but cluttered, full of ink pots and miniature watercolors pinned to the molding. She didn't offer coffee, just sat and looked at me. "You're asking about Oliver?" I nodded. "I'm not police," I said. "I know. You're dressed too well." I didn't comment. She reached into a drawer and pulled out an old Guardian press pass. His photograph, slightly crooked, serious eyes, thin tie, side-parted hair. "That's the man," she said. "He thought the city was rotting under him." "What? Made him believe it?" She folded her arms. "He started asking about a housing contract. Some neighborhood slated for demolition. The bids were wrong, too high. Same companies, same handwriting on different forms. You ever see the documents?" "No, but he told me he typed copies. 2 sets. Kept one at home," said the other. "Would go to print. And did it. No issue went out that week. He called in, said he was ill. Then he vanished." Her face tightened. "I always thought someone got to him." "Any idea who?" "Take your pick. Half the council hated him. So did the sanitation board, the parks department, and 2 Catholic schools." She let out a slow breath. "But there was one man he feared. Name? Dominic Keene. I knew it. City alderman," she nodded. "He once cornered Oliver after a fundraiser and said, 'Print my name again, and it won't be your typewriter that breaks.' Witnesses? Just me." I stood. "Thank you, Miss Holt. One last question. Yes? If he were alive, would he have reached out to you?" She looked away. "He wouldn't have run." I took the stairwell down, boots echoing against the tile. Outside, the wind had picked up. I flagged a cab and gave the Brownstones' address. Inside Wolfe's office, he had a globe open on his lap and a thick folder spread across the desk. The windows glowed amber. Somewhere in the kitchen, Fritz was butchering a carrot with surgical precision. I gave Wolfe the rundown. His only comment came at the end. "A man with enemies, no allies, and a story too large for ink. Do we believe it?" He didn't look up. "We must determine if anyone tried to silence him, or only erase his words." He gestured to the folder. "There's a copy of the Guardian's final issue in there. No column, just a blank half-page." I turned it over. In my hand, a missing editorial, a vanished man, and now, perhaps, a typewriter that once spoke too loudly. Wolfe muttered, "Silence often follows truth, not because it lacks proof, but because it lacks protection." I didn't reply, but I kept the photo. The knock at the door came like a short sentence with no commas. Fritz didn't move, naturally. I opened it. Inspector Kramer stood on the stoop with his fedora pulled low and his coat collar higher. He didn't wait for an invitation. "I swear, Goodwin, one of these days I'll bring my own chair. Red or yellow?" He grunted. I closed. The door behind him. Inside, the brownstone smelled of lemon polish and roasted onions. Fritz's doing. Wolfe was already seated in the office, feet planted, eyes half-lidded behind the rim of a glass of beer. Kramer peeled off his gloves as he entered. "You're expecting snow," Wolfe said. "I'm expecting answers," Kramer replied. "And coffee." I nodded toward the dining room, already brewing. He sat in one of the red chairs, tugging it back with a scowl as if the legs had wronged him. Wolfe didn't look up. "To what do we owe the displeasure?" I got a whisper yesterday. "From downtown. Your name came up, along with Oliver Vendramini's." Wolfe turned a page in the evening edition. "His name doesn't belong downtown. It belongs in the ledger of forgotten men." Kramer leaned forward. "Then what are you doing poking around in it?" "I am not poking, Inspector. I am excavating." "And what exactly are you digging for?" "The truth," Wolfe said, "though I suspect you misplaced it years ago." Kramer's jaw shifted. "Vendramini vanished. That's not a crime. He wasn't murdered. No body, no blood, no file," Wolfe added. Kramer said nothing. Wolfe raised his eyes. "Ah, there it is. There's no case," Kramer said slowly. "There was never a case." "Then tell me," Wolfe said, voice cool. "How does a man vanish, mid-career, in a city that records everything from his birth to his library finds, and yet leave no footprint?" Kramer's fingers drummed on the armrest. I looked. There's nothing. Not even a missing persons report. That is rather the point. I entered with the coffee. Kramer took it black. Wolfe waited. "So?" Kramer set the cup down with care. I asked around. Unofficially. The clerk at Central said there used to be a file. Handwritten. One folder. It's gone. Wolfe nodded. Erased. Conveniently. Lost. "No," Wolfe said. "Buried." Kramer stood, walked to the window and looked out. "I've worked in that department 23 years. Files don't just vanish, unless someone wants them to." You think someone shut it down? I think someone made certain it was never opened. Kramer turned back. Why would anyone care about a nervous editor and a vague rumor? Wolfe didn't answer. He reached for his beer and drank slowly. When the glass came down, he said, "Because rumors are how revolutions begin." Kramer paced once. His shoes made dull echoes on the floor, worn soles, heavy tread. "I'm not here to play politics, Wolfe." "You never are," Wolfe replied. "And yet politics plays you." Kramer let that pass. He stood behind the red chair now, one hand gripping its wooden spine. Whatever Vendramini had, it never reached the press. "No," Wolfe said, "but he told people he would publish. The night he disappeared. Bluster. Perhaps. But bluster doesn't." "Erase files." Kramer looked toward me. "You still chasing librarians and ghost machines?" "We're just getting started." He let out a slow breath. "You know what the trouble is with these dead man cases? They smell like old cigars," I offered. "They don't stay buried," Kramer muttered. He turned back to Wolfe. "If you dig, and there's nothing, just wind, then this whole thing dies quiet." "I accept that," Wolfe said. "And if it's more," Wolfe laced his fingers, "then someone should be nervous." Kramer reached into his coat, pulled out a small folded paper, and tossed it onto the desk. "A name. Dominic Keene. You didn't get it from me." Wolfe did not unfold it. He didn't need to. "Keene is a symptom. He's powerful. He's mortal," Wolfe replied. Kramer's jaw tightened. "If you're right, then you'll arrest no one," Wolfe said. "Not yet. Because a mistake now would warn whoever's watching." Kramer stared a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. "I'm not giving you a badge," he said. Wolfe raised a brow. "I don't want one." Kramer walked to the door. He paused, hand on the knob. "I'm not putting this in the record," he said. "Not yet. Then you're wiser than I thought." He opened the door, "and I thought you were fat and useless." "I still am," Wolfe said. "But I'm also listening." Kramer left. The door closed. Wolfe tapped the arm of his chair twice. "Well, Archie, I think we just confirmed the case exists." He looked at me. "More accurately, we confirmed. Someone didn't want it to." I nodded toward the folded paper. "You gonna read it?" "I already did," he said. He picked it up and dropped it into the wastebasket. Keene was in the margins from the start. "I prefer names that don't offer themselves." He rose, slowly, methodically. "Tomorrow you will visit the Hall of Records." I gave a short groan. "Why me?" "Because I despise basements." He turned toward the dining room. "And because someone there will remember a file that never existed." He paused. "Bring flowers. Archivists respond to sentiment. And if they don't, then bring charm." He left. I poured a second coffee. Outside, the street was dark. But inside, Wolfe had decided something. This wasn't about ghosts. It was about men who rewrite history, one file at a time. The bell over the door gave a sharp little ring, like a silver fork on glass. I stepped inside. The shop was narrow, lined, wall to wall with machines. Typewriters mostly, some black with polished brass levers, some grey with chipped enamel. Most looked like they'd written manifestos or poetry, or maybe just kept men from drowning in themselves. Behind the counter stood a man who looked as though he had never typed a careless word in his life. "Mr. Marchand," he nodded without looking up. His spectacles caught the amber light of the desk lamp. "I was told you specialize in European models." "I specialize in stories," he said, "which is what machines become once the paper's gone." I took a folded page from my inside coat pocket and slid it across the counter. It had the make and serial number from the attic typewriter, handwritten, block ink, underlined once. He picked it up gently, adjusted his spectacles, and read it aloud. "Olivetti Studio 42, serial number, He set the page down and walked to a tall cabinet near the back. While he searched, I let my eyes scan the rows. Some had Cyrillic keys, others bore custom plates, government seals, college crests, foreign insignia. Everyone had a history. Marchand returned with a ledger, green cloth binding, held together by tape and reverence. That number was part of a lot shipped from Milan in late 36. Rare model. Very few made it past customs. He ran a finger down the handwritten entries. This one was sold to a city procurement officer. Manhattan. Purchased through a third-party distributor. Alden Office Supply. Canal Street. January 1937. "Do you have the name of the clerk?" He tapped the line. "James the Fur Loffrey." I didn't blink. Loffrey? Yes. Why? He died that same year. Marchand nodded. I heard. Fell down a marble staircase at the courthouse. Broken neck. I pulled a notepad from my coat and made a note. The name had come up before. Barely a whisper in Delia's story. Just a footnote under years of dust. Was the machine returned? No, Marchand said. It never came back through any channel I know. Could someone have traced the machine? If they knew the serial. To anyone but me? No. He closed the ledger and returned it to the cabinet with both hands. That machine is a rarity, he said. Even more so with a clean carriage and full ribbon. A quiet model. Smooth feed. No clatter. A good choice for someone trying to hide their typing. Or preserve it, he said. It made beautiful copies. I nodded. Anything else? Marchand hesitated. There was a rumor, he said, that one of those machines was used to transcribe sealed testimony from a grand jury inquiry. Illegally. Here in New York? He gave a half smile. Where else do sealed things leak like sieves? I thanked him, left a business card, and stepped back into the early dusk. Outside, the wind had picked up. A fine grit of snow danced through the gutters, like restless ghosts. I turned up my collar and headed south toward Canal, past butchers, newsboys, and the steam pipes on Mulberry that huffed like tired horses. Olden office supply had vanished years ago. The storefront was now a pawn shop, its windows crowded with saxophones, toasters, and a baby blue rotary phone that would never ring again. But inside, near the back, I found someone who remembered. An old man, cross-legged on a stool with a visor, and a crossword puzzle, nodded when I showed him the serial number. That's one of the Italians, he said. Olivetti. We sold 6, maybe 7. I gave him a name. Loffrey, he snorted. The guy who fell down the stairs? Same. Yeah. City order. He came in himself. Didn't want delivery. Said he'd carry it. He mimed the gesture. 2 hands under a box. I offered him the demo. He wanted a fresh one. Paid with a certified check. City seal. Anything strange about him? He wore a red tie. I waited. In January. I left him to his puzzle. Back. At the brownstone, Fritz was preparing turnips for supper. Wolfe was in the office, mid-sentence in a German botanical journal. I waited until he finished the paragraph. Well, he asked without looking up. The typewriter was real, I said. Bought in 37 by a city procurement clerk named Loffrey. He closed the journal with a soft thump. Cause of death, fall, down the courthouse stairs, broken neck. Convenient. More than that, he paid for the machine personally, picked it up, refused the demo. Wolfe lifted a brow. He wanted no other hands on it. Right, I poured myself a glass. Of water, there's more. A collector says one of those machines was used to transcribe sealed testimony. Grand jury. Off the books. Wolfe grunted. Illegally. Is there another kind? He leaned back. So Vendramini's typewriter may not have been used to write articles. It may have been used to copy confessions. Wolfe nodded once, which makes it not a relic, but a threat. He stood slowly, walked to the windows, and looked out at the blank sky. If Loffrey was the machine's custodian, and he died, then someone took over, or took it. He turned back to me. Archie, find Loffrey's personnel file. Go back to the borough archives. Ask who filed the death report. Ask who signed off on the stairs being wet, or the lights being out, or the witness who heard nothing. That's a lot of asking. Then begin tonight. I finished my water, grabbed my coat. One last thing, I said. He waited. Marchand says the Olivetti Studio 42 makes perfect copies. Quiet. No clatter. Smooth ink. Wolfe returned to his desk. Then someone wanted to record something no one could hear. I paused at the door and typed something no one could trace. Wolfe didn't look up. Until now. Fritz never disturbed the sanctity of the office unless summoned. But that morning, as Wolfe and I prepared for the arrival of a newspaper, editor with loose lips and tighter ethics, he knocked. Twice. Wolfe scowled. Enter! Fritz stepped in, holding something between thumb and forefinger, with the same expression he wore when removing bone fragments from a trout. This was inside. The ribbon spool compartment, he said. The one from Miss Hartley's attic. Wolfe held out his hand. It was a newspaper clipping, folded twice, yellowed and small. Fritz passed it over, then returned to the kitchen. Wolfe unfolded it slowly. I crossed the room to lean over his shoulder. The clipping was from the New York Ledger, dated October 4th, 1937. The headline read, City clerk found dead near Park Steps, police suspect suicide. The article, no longer than a cigarette, named the man as Franklin M. Bell. age 43, unmarried, and employed at the records division of the borough office. I frowned. That's not Crenshaw. No, Wolfe said. It is not. I pulled the original letter from the file drawer. The typed confession names Crenshaw, but this predates his death by 5 months and points to a different man. Wolfe laid the two side by side, silent. I read aloud from the clipping. Bell had recently been treated for exhaustion. No witnesses. Found at dawn by a milkman. His death was ruled voluntary. Wolfe tapped the armrest. It was not mentioned. By Miss Hartley. She didn't know. She should have. I dropped into the chair opposite. What are you thinking? Wolfe folded his hands. I am thinking the letter was not typed at the time it claims. You think it's a forgery? No. I think it is a substitution. He leaned forward slightly. Someone took a real confession and replaced its subject. I looked again at the type. The same machine. Almost certainly. He nodded. Toward the clipping. But whoever left this, deliberately or not, was careless. I rose, paced once. So the original letter may have referred to Bell. Yes. But the version we received names Crenshaw. Wolfe lifted a brow. And only one of them is still believed to have died by accident. Which one was the truth? That, Wolfe said, is what we must now determine. I sat again. Why change the name? To shift suspicion? To revise history? Or to frame a man already dead? He reached for the bell. Fritz reappeared with his usual grace. Notify Miss Hartley, Wolfe said. Ask her to bring the original envelope and anything else she found in the attic. Yes, sir. Archie, Wolfe said. You'll return. To the city records office. Pull both files, Bell and Crenshaw, if they still exist. If they do not, Wolfe said, we may confirm that erasure is the true crime. The municipal records building was warmer than usual. I climbed to the 3rd floor, past 2 secretaries and a stack of unfiled payroll ledgers. The archivist on duty was a woman named Blumenthal, glasses chained at the neck, cardigan-like armor. Franklin Bell and James Crenshaw, I said. Death files, employment records, any incident reports. She gave me a look like I'd asked. For the mayor's dental chart, both borough employees. One in 37, the other in 38. Exactly. She sighed and vanished into the stacks, muttering about audit logs and reclassification drawers. 20 minutes passed. She returned with 2 folders. Bell's was crisp, Crenshaw's was thin. This is all that's left, she said. I opened Bell's. Termination. October 3rd, 1937. Death certificate enclosed. Manner, suicide. Witness, none. Location, Fort Tryon Park. No personal effects listed. 1 note scribbled on the inside flap. Subject had requested leave 2 weeks prior. Declined. Now Crenshaw. Termination. March 1938. No death certificate. In file. Just a 1-page statement from Alderman Keene's office, confirming sudden departure from post. Reason. Personal health. That was it. No witness account. No official ruling. Not even a date of burial. I closed the folders. Has anyone accessed these in the last 10 years? I asked. Blumenthal checked the clipboard on the counter. Crenshaw. No. Bell. Yes. Once. 17 years ago. Handwritten request by a journalist. Oliver Vendramini. I thanked her and left. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was reading Horace in translation. I waited until he set the volume down. Bell's file confirms suicide. Crenshaw's? No death record at all. Wolfe nodded slowly. And yet, the letter claims Crenshaw died and was silenced. I sat. But if Bell died first, by 5 months, and the machine was his, then the original letter named Bell, and someone replaced him with Crenshaw after the fact. Why Crenshaw? Because his death left less paper. Wolfe turned toward the desk and retrieved the clipping again. This was folded into the machine by mistake, or left as a warning. He looked up, which implies the forger was careless or conflicted. Fritz entered quietly with a tray. Delia Hartley followed behind. I brought everything, she said. Her face was drawn, her hands gloved. She opened a folder. Inside, the original envelope. 2 blank carbon sheets. 1 half-torn corner of onion skin paper with faint purple bleed. Text reversed. I held it to the light. Looks like a retyped draft, I said. Wolfe took it, examined it. Typed in haste. Wrong spacing. Different. Pressure. He turned to her. Miss Hartley, your uncle may have discovered the forgery himself. Her voice barely rose. Then why didn't he tell anyone? Because he didn't know who to trust. Wolfe laid the items in front of him. "We now know this," he said. "Someone tampered with a confession typed before Belle's death. They changed the name. They adjusted the story. They created a second narrative, one that left fewer questions." He folded his hands. "And in doing so, they framed the wrong suicide." I looked over at him. "You think the real target was never Belle or Crenshaw?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "I think the real target was the man who tried to tell the truth. Vendramini." "Yes." And with that, the room fell quiet. Only the typewriter ribbon remembered what came first. The cab let me off on East 10th, an ocean parkway, where the wind came in from the river, with a dampness that crept into your bones. Flatbush in winter isn't a place for the sentimental. Bare trees, tired stoops, an old brick pressed close like shoulders in prayer. I checked the name on the mailbox. B. Vendramini, Aptian 3R. The brass was tarnished, but the lettering was still neat. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and floor wax. I climbed slowly. No elevator, no music, just the creak of stairs and the hush that follows widows. She answered on the third knock. "Mrs. Vendramini?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "You're from him." She didn't ask who. Beatrice Vendramini had the look of a woman who'd aged without softness. Her eyes were dark and dry, the kind that had already wept what they would and saved the rest. She wore a wool shawl and house slippers, and her left hand never left the doorframe. "I'm Archie Goodwin. Nero Wolfe sent me." She nodded and opened the door. The apartment was clean but thin. No clutter, no curtains. Just a radio in the corner, a small oil painting of the Italian coast, and a table with one chair pulled out and one pushed in. "Sit," she said. "I have coffee. It's instant. That'll be fine." She poured it from a kettle already on the stove. The cup was chipped. The silence was not. I waited until she settled. "We're looking into your husband's disappearance." She didn't blink. "You're 15 years late." "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not." She studied me. "He didn't run," she said. "I believe you. He didn't run, and he didn't cheat, and he didn't drink himself into a gutter. He left that night with his notes and never came back." "What kind of notes?" "His diaries." "You mean journals?" "No," she said. "He kept two kinds, one with thoughts, one with facts. The ones with thoughts he burned every month, but the ones with facts he stored in a box under the bed. And they're gone? Vanished. Same night as him." She sipped her coffee. Not a thing was out, of place. No lock broken, no signs of a struggle, just his coat missing, and that box. I nodded. "Did he ever say what he was working on?" She set the cup down. "He said he was building a case, said the city would crack if he got it to the right judge." "Did he name anyone?" "Yes." She stood, walked to a small cabinet near the kitchen, and removed a single folded sheet of onion skin paper. She handed it to me. Written in pencil, faint but legible, was one name, Dominic Keene. "He feared that man," she said, "not because he was loud, but because he never raised his voice." I refolded the note. "Did Oliver ever say what he'd do if something happened?" She nodded. "He said if the wrong people got to the right drawer, they'd find what mattered." I turned the note over in my hand. "Did he keep copies?" She shook her head. "No. He said one copy is a record. 2 copies are a liability." I asked, "Why write Keene's name down at all?" "To remind himself," she said, "or in case someone came looking." I placed the paper into an inner envelope and slipped it into my coat. "Did you ever meet Keene?" "Once," she said, "in a receiving line at a fundraiser." He smiled at Oliver like he was furniture. Her lips tightened. Oliver said later that night, "Men like him don't kill people. They erase them." She stood and crossed to the window. Thin daylight filtered through the frost on the glass. He stopped going out alone that month. Started locking his desk drawers. Changed his walking route. I leaned forward. "Did anyone follow him?" "I don't know," she said softly. "But he acted like someone had. Did he name anyone else?" "No, just Keene. He said the man was behind something." "What something?" She looked at me. "I don't think he ever figured that part out." I rose. "I'll need a copy of that handwriting and anything else from his files. Receipts, addresses, drafts." She gave a small smile. "There's nothing left. The police took what they found, and what they found was nothing. No file, no record. They said it was unusual but inconclusive." That was the phrase. I buttoned my coat. "If anything turns up, I'll call your boss." She walked me to the door. Her fingers touched my sleeve before I stepped into the hallway. "I've lived 15 years with no answer," she said. "If you find the truth, don't bury it." "I won't. I meant it." The ride back to Manhattan was slow. Snow had started falling in steady, unspectacular flakes, like ash off a long cigarette. I stared out the cab window as the city shifted from grey to white. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the office, breathing behind a copy of Pliny the Elder, and a slice of stolen Fritz had smuggled from the bakery on 13th. I dropped the folded note onto the desk. Keene. Wolfe didn't react. He's not just a whisper anymore, I said. She confirmed it. Oliver feared him, named him. Wolfe reached for the note and examined it closely. Pencil, soft hand, private ink, not meant for others, she says. The diaries vanished with him. So did a locked box. He nodded. Then his killer took what mattered, and left what couldn't speak. Why leave Keene's name behind? Wolfe folded the page slowly. Because truth is like rot, Archie. Even when sealed, it spreads. I took a seat. You think he was killed? I think he was removed. And the police will find nothing until it finds them first. He leaned back. Make a list. Everyone Keene employed. Everyone Vendramini investigated. Everyone in between. Where do we start? Wolfe closed his eyes. With the box that disappeared. I nodded. And the one man who wanted it gone. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The Aldous Club sat on West 38th, a stone's throw from power, and 3 blocks from memory. Dark wood panelling, cut glass chandeliers, and enough cigar smoke to write your own obituary in the air. Membership required lineage, or at least the illusion of it. I'd borrowed a suit from Saul and a surname from nowhere. The doorman glanced once at the card I presented, then nodded me through with a bow you could iron shirts on. Inside, the bar gleamed. A pianist hummed his way through Harlem Nocturne. 2 aldermen, 3 bankers, and a retired ambassador held court near the windows. Dominic Keene was in the far corner, seated with brandy and the Wall Street Journal folded in half. He looked the same as the photo Beatrice had shown me. Silver hair, buttoned cuffs, and the permanent calm of a man who always enters the room second, but leaves it last. I approached with casual precision. Mr. Keene? He looked up. Smile rehearsed. Yes? Henry Masters, Public Forum Weekly. I'd love to ask you about your years on the infrastructure board. His smile held. Barely. Do I know your editor? He knows you, I said. He's the one who sent me. That earned a slow nod. Sit, Mr. Masters. Let's waste some time. I sat. He ordered another brandy with a flick of 2 fingers. I don't usually talk to weeklies. I'm flattered. You shouldn't be. I'm bored. I leaned forward slightly. We're doing a piece on lost civic projects, the ones that got tied up, buried, or, he waved a hand, left to rot in committee. I was there, I remember. Do you remember a man named Oliver Vendramini? His brandy paused an inch from his mouth. Of course, he said. Editor. Self-important. Vanished. You worked together? No. He wrote things. I read them. Did he ever accuse you of anything? Keene's eyes narrowed. Still. Smiling. Only in print. And off the record. Never had the courage. I pulled a notebook from my pocket. Let it rest on the table. Unopened. There's talk he kept a file. Something typed. Do you know anything about an Olivetti? Studio 42? Keene blinked. Once. That was all. But the glass in his hand tilted. Just enough to nick the edge of the coaster. He corrected it quickly. Too quickly. Olivetti? He said, brushing a speck from his cuff. Italian machine, yes? Rare in the States, I said. Almost all were government issue. I wouldn't know. No, I said. I suppose not. He leaned back. You said this was about infrastructure. I nodded. It still is. He smiled wider. Then ask me about pipes, not ghosts. I closed the notebook. Thanks, you for your time. Of course. He stood. I let him. A man who stands when he knows he's being watched isn't afraid, but a man who smiles too much when nothing's funny. He's hiding something. I left the Aldous Club just after 5. The snow had started again, soft and colourless. I walked 3 blocks before lighting a cigarette and ducking into a phone booth. Near Bryant Park, Wolfe answered after the 4th ring. He blinked, I said. That's not data. He also twitched when I said Olivetti. You want a confession in Latin? No, Wolfe replied. I want facts. You'll return immediately. I hung up and caught a cab downtown. By the time I reached the brownstone, Fritz was already at the door, dish towel in hand. He didn't speak. He just handed me a folded slip of paper. I unfolded it. Call Delia. Urgent. AG. The line was already connected when I stepped into the office. She answered on the 1st ring. They broke in, she said. Start over. I came home from... The library. My shift ended at 4. The door was locked, but the bolt was scratched. Someone forced it. The typewriter. Gone. Anything else? No. Nothing taken. Nothing touched. Just that. Police? No. I wanted to call you first. You did right. I looked at Wolfe. He was motionless in his chair, but his eyes had narrowed. I hung up and faced him. She says they only took the typewriter. Then it was no ordinary thief, Wolfe said. No amateur would recognize that model by sight. She kept it boxed. In the attic again. Then someone knew where to look. Inside job? No, Wolfe said. Persistent one. I sat. Keene was smooth. Too smooth. The twitch was real. Wolfe nodded. He knew the model, and probably knew what it had typed. Wolfe closed his eyes. We are no longer looking for a motive. We are now looking for what was missed. The ribbon? Perhaps. Or a key strike. Or spacing. I stood again. What do you want me to do? Go to the apartment. Police? Not yet. He picked up a pad of paper and began to write. You will find the window of entry, the footprints, what was touched, and whether the thief was careful or hurried. Why does that matter? Because, he said, if they searched, they feared something else was hidden. He tore the page and handed it to me. Take Saul. He'll know what to look for. I pocketed it. Wolfe turned his chair toward the window. They want the machine silenced, which means it still speaks. I opened the door. And? Wolfe didn't look at me. Someone killed a man to erase a sentence, he said. Now they want to erase the ink. You're being obstinate, I said. Wolfe did not lift his gaze from the morning paper. He turned a page with the precision of a banker counting bills. I am being consistent, he said. That is different. I leaned against the corner of the desk, arms crossed. There's a file at the Borough Archive, a logbook, possibly, even court minutes, all pointing to whatever Vendramini got his hands on. Wolfe lowered the paper. I do not climb steps. I do not dodge bureaucrats. I do not dig through municipal dust. You do when it's orchids. He scowled. Plants do not lie. Archivists do. Fritz entered with eggs and trout on a silver tray. Wolfe nodded once and reached for the pepper. I tried again. If there's a record, it'll be there. Even if it's erased, we'll see the scratch marks. He took a bite and chewed with deliberate contempt. I will not leave this house. That is final. I straightened. Then who? He pushed aside his plate and reached for the stationery. With a thick nib pen, he began writing, pausing between each sentence as if weighing it against a courtroom clock. Who's it for? A man who once knew the difference between justice and its echo. 2 minutes later, he folded the page and sealed it with wax. Judge Marcus Caro, retired, Staten Island. No phone. I blinked. Caro. He presided over a closed grand jury in 1938, the same year Vendramini vanished. I stepped forward, took the envelope. Why him? Because, Wolfe said, he did not play by the city's rules. And because the last time I asked him for silence, he granted it. And now, Wolfe reclined. Now I ask him to speak. The ferry to Staten Island was cold and half empty. I sat near the window and watched the skyline flatten behind us. By the time we docked, the wind had picked up and the streets had emptied like the inside of a closed briefcase. Caro's house sat at the end of a dead street, shutters drawn, no car in the drive, just a rusted mailbox and the faint smell of firewood. I rang once, a long pause, then a shuffle behind the door. It opened an inch. Eyes peered out, grey, cautious, intelligent. Judge Caro. Yes? My name's Archie Goodwin. I work with Nero Wolfe. His face didn't change, but the door opened wider. Inside, the house was dry and warm. Bookshelves lined every wall. A fire was going in the hearth, and a wool blanket lay folded across the arm of a leather chair. He moved with a limp, slower than I remembered from photos. He took the envelope without a word, slit it open with a dull knife, and read, twice, then folded the letter and slid it into his breast pocket. You know, he said, I swore I'd never revisit that year. I believe it. But he wrote, so I will speak. He motioned to a chair. I sat. He stayed standing, staring into the fire. In 1938, he said, the city convened a secret grand jury. Officially, it was about zoning irregularities. In truth, it was about money and power. Who led it? Vendramini gave us the names. Dozens. All linked to a fake contracting ring. Multiple aldermen, one deputy comptroller, and a private. Fund Keene administered off the books. You indicted? We tried. One juror resigned. Another disappeared. The last meeting never happened. 2 files were stolen before we could convene. The rest were sealed. He walked slowly to a glass cabinet and unlocked it. Inside, a thin black folder, tied with a leather cord. He brought it to me, opened it carefully, and removed a single typed page. It was Vendramini's, no doubt, typed on the same model. Spacing identical, that distinctive lowercase e tilt. But this wasn't the same confession. It was longer, and it named Keene. Why keep this? Because I promised him I would, Caro said. He gave it to you directly? Yes, 1 week before he disappeared. Did you tell the police? They came. I said nothing. I burned everything else. I stared at the page. This is evidence. No, Caro said. It's a warning, but it's all that's left. I looked up. Will you give it to Wolfe? He nodded once. I'll come to the brownstone tomorrow, with what I have. Thank you. He walked me to the door, pausing only once. Mr. Goodwin. Yes, there are men who play at power, and then there are men who erase it. Keene. He's not clever, but he listens. That makes him dangerous. The ferryback was slower. The city lights glinted like secrets behind thick glass. At the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair, sipping beer and watching the fire die. I handed him the page. He read it without comment. When he finished, he looked at me. Well, he'll come tomorrow, in person. Wolfe placed the page on the desk, next to the earlier letter. They were cousins, one edited, one not. Archie, he said, do you know why men like Keene fear typewriters? Because they don't blink? Wolfe shook his head. Because they remember exactly what was said. No more, no less. He leaned back. And now we have the version. Someone tried to bury. I sat. Then we're close. Yes, Wolfe murmured. Close enough to be seen. The morning rain had slicked Manhattan's streets to a mirror. I returned to the brownstone just past 10. Trench coat damp at the collar, hat under one arm, and a folded packet in the other. Fritz took one look at me in the front hall and didn't speak. Good man. Inside the office, Wolfe was settled as always in the yellow chair. He had not moved the ivory letter opener from its stand since I'd left. A faint aroma of shaved orange peel lingered from Fritz's morning custard. I handed him the envelope. He was waiting. You were right. And scared enough to jump at shadows. Wolfe didn't answer. His fingers slipped the packet open. He drew out the letter first. Creamy, age-stained, faintly brittle. He read it in silence. Then, with a soft exhale, he laid it aside and unfolded the accompanying document. A thin sheet of onion skin, typed, dated, June 18th, 1938. Confession of Oliver Vendramini. Wolfe adjusted his glasses. And the man? Judge. Orrin Flanders. Still wears his robes, figuratively speaking. Lives in self-imposed exile above a paint shop in Flushing. He wouldn't say how he got the confession, just that it was mailed to him under plain cover the day after Vendramini's. Death, death. Wolfe's eyes flicked up. Not disappearance, not by a long shot. The judge had proof. I pulled the second sheet from my coat pocket and laid it flat on Wolfe's desk. A death certificate filed under the name Ellis. Baird. Body pulled from a Hudson warehouse 2 weeks after Vendramini vanished. No next of kin, no investigation. Wolfe scanned it. Coroner's signature. Authentic, I said. But the fingerprint file is blank. It was archived, not flagged. He leaned back. His belly pushed forward slightly, the only movement. That passed for tension in that room. Ellis Baird, he repeated. A name without history. Fits the time, the place. And the autopsy report lists a crushed throat. Not a suicide. A garrote. Wolfe's hand hovered over the confession. The suicide note we received, typed on the Studio 42? Not by Vendramini, I said. Not if this document's legit. And if it is, that means the real confession was hidden until now. Wolfe closed his eyes. And the suicide of the procurement clerk? I answered slowly. The clerk who approved the Olivetti purchase? That man died 5 months later, pushed down a staircase at the courthouse, ruled accidental. Wolfe opened his eyes. And the typewriter vanished. Stolen from Delia's apartment the same night we visited Keene, I said. Too convenient. Wolfe tapped the corner of the confession. This was what Vendramini died to protect. He exposed a rigged city contract. The clerk confirmed it. Then someone eliminated them both. I nodded and tried to frame the wrong man with a retyped suicide note. Wolfe was silent. The rain softened against the windows. From the kitchen came the faint clink of china. Then he spoke. Mr. Goodwin, summon Inspector Kramer. Tell him to bring his appetite and his badge. I raised a brow. You're handing it over. No, he said, rising with some effort. I'm handing him the scent. He may sniff, bark, and bluster, but the trail begins here. I called Kramer from the hall phone and left the necessary bait. A murder, buried records, and a judge too. Scared to sneeze. That was enough. 35 minutes later, he stomped into the brownstone with his hat still dripping and a disposition best described as sulphuric. I don't like puzzles, Wolfe, he said, lowering himself into the red chair with a grunt. Especially ones that start with phantoms and dead clerks. Wolfe gestured toward the file I'd laid out on the desk. Then start with facts. This is the original confession of Oliver Vendramini, dated and typed before his death. Kramer eyed it without touching. And where did this turn up? In the possession of a retired judge, Wolfe said, who received it by post and then buried it, fearing reprisal. Kramer shifted. Reprisal from whom? That, Wolfe said, is your occupation, not mine. I handed Kramer the fake suicide note, the forged confession typed on the Olivetti, and the death certificate for Ellis Baird. Vendramini was murdered, Wolfe said, likely garroted, his body hidden under a false name. The clerk who could confirm the city procurement fraud was disposed of next. Pushed down a staircase, staged to appear accidental, and someone retyped the confession, I added, using the Olivetti, likely to frame Vendramini and end any investigation. Kramer took a slow breath, flipping through the pages. If this is true, I'll have half the courthouse under lock. No, Wolfe said. If this is true, the rot runs deeper. You'll need a warrant, discretion, and a palate for political bile. Kramer met Wolfe's gaze. And you planning to testify? Wolfe snorted. My function ends with revelation, Inspector. I am not an acrobat in your courtroom circus. Kramer ignored that. He turned to me. Where's this judge? I gave him the address. Top floor above a paint shop in Flushing. Be polite. He's old and brittle and scared stiff. Kramer pocketed the pages and rose. This better be real, Wolfe. I don't like being made a dancing bear. Wolfe didn't respond. After Kramer left, I poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a clean glass and took it to the desk. Wolfe accepted it, though he didn't drink yet. You know, I said, settling into the red chair. There's a line in that confession that stuck with me. Wolfe grunted. Recite, Vendramini wrote. I kept the records. I made the notes. If I vanish, I did not jump. Wolfe took a sip. That line, he said, cost him his life. And the clerk, footnote, Wolfe said, but essential. He confirmed the order, knew the bribe, suspected the cover-up. His death was the warning bell. I stood and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The city gleamed like a silver shell. Behind me, Wolfe's voice dropped a half octave. Archie, yeah, this city kills its conscience slowly. A strangled truth, a forged document, a borrowed name. I turned. So what now? Wolfe exhaled. Now we wait. Kramer will bluster. Someone will panic. The noose tightens when a man forgets who was watching. I smiled faintly. You always assume they forget. He closed his eyes. No, I assume they miscalculate, and I prepare the reckoning. Outside, a car engine coughed to life, and somewhere a siren sang its first low note. Inside, Wolfe finished his bourbon and returned the glass to the coaster, perfectly centered. Keene stiffened. My name? Wolfe nodded. The spacing. The Studio 42's key arms strike with a distinct rhythm. Each typist leaves a fingerprint in pressure, interval, and character slant. You, Mr. Keene, are left-handed. Delia's eyes darted toward Keene's wineglass, lifted awkwardly with his left. I haven't typed a letter in 20 years, Keene said. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, I drew the envelope from my jacket. Letter to a city contractor. Dated March of this year. Signed by Keene. Typed. I unfolded the pages. Same model, same ribbon, same punctuation habits, and the same custom spacing, 0.4 millimeters too tight after an M dash. Beatrice let out a sound, not quite a gasp. You stole the confession, Wolfe said. You retyped it. You framed a man who died trying to tell the truth. Keene's mouth opened, then closed. You had motive, Wolfe continued. Vendramini knew you diverted funds, under the pretense of urban renewal. He refused the bribe. You had him killed. You buried his body under a false name. But the clerk, he knew, so you killed again. Delia stood. You're out of your mind. I am not, Wolfe said. You, Miss Morse, are incidental. Your inheritance clouded the paper trail, but you are not guilty. She sat. Thane cleared his throat. This is extraordinary. But how do you prove the murder? Wolfe tapped the plastic sleeve. The ribbon and the confession contain a third name. Faded, barely visible. The typist paused mid-sentence. The name, Dominic Keene. Keene stood now, pushing the chair. Back so quickly it scraped the floor. No jury is required, Wolfe said. Merely a statement. I have arranged for Mr. Kramer's presence in the front room. He will escort you. I rose from my chair. Shall we? Keene looked at Beatrice, then at Delia, then at the trout. He walked toward the foyer with a lawyer's dignity, but a murderer's eyes. The door closed behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, made heavier by the weight of justice rebalanced. Beatrice whispered, Oliver was a kind man. I begged him not to file the report, but he said, what's true is true, even if it costs me. Wolfe said nothing. He reached for his glass. Fritz stepped forward again, removing the plates. No one touched the rice. I never read the real letter, Delia murmured. My mother never told me. She was protecting you, Wolfe replied, in her own flawed way. Thane stood and straightened his cuffs. A confession buried in an attic. A clerk shoved downstairs. An alderman unmasked. I must say, Mr. Wolfe, you have a flair for theatre. Wolfe didn't acknowledge it. I presume I may collect the Olivetti for restoration, Thane asked. No, Wolfe said. It is evidence. Thane hesitated. I see. Fritz returned with black coffee and almond tort. I will draft a statement, Wolfe said, to be signed by Mrs. Vendramini, attesting to the theft of her husband's diaries. The rest I will leave to Inspector Kramer. I took a slow sip. Of coffee? You had it from the punctuation. Wolfe's eyes closed. The comma betrayed him, and the semicolon saved the dead man's name. Wolfe didn't answer. The fire crackled. Outside, a breeze stirred the velvet curtains. Another. Case closed. Another silence earned. And somewhere, far off in Flatbush, an old widow might sleep a little easier tonight. The typewriter, sealed now in its evidence box, rested on the sideboard, silent, but not quite done speaking. The clock in the front room chimed once. 8:30. Wolfe, settled in his yellow chair, held a single sheet of paper with gloved fingers. The fire, behind the brass screen, cracked softly. My chair was angled slightly, my notebook untouched. We weren't waiting. We were prepared. Delia Morse sat near the windows, arms folded. Beatrice Vendramini, drawn but composed, kept to the red chair nearest the orchids. Thane Langley leaned forward, intrigued. The collector's eyes flicked between Wolfe and the page. Keene stood. He had refused to sit. Wolfe exhaled, slowly. This, he said, was typed on the Olivetti. Keene scoffed. The ribbon confirms it, and the spacing. But more than that, it bears a signature, not in ink. In consequence, he extended the page toward me. I took it, crossed the room, and handed it to Beatrice. She didn't read it aloud. Her eyes moved line by line. Her fingers trembled once, then steadied. It's his, she said. Oliver typed this. She handed it to Thane. Wolfe closed his eyes. This page was never published. It was meant for the district attorney. It details a network of falsified contracts, misappropriated redevelopment funds, and the name of the man who ordered 2 deaths. Thane looked up from the page. Keene. Yes. Keene's voice rose. You call this evidence? A page with no witness? The page came from the judge. A man you tried to destroy. I never met him. Then why, Mr. Keene? Wolfe asked. Does he remember the date you arrived at his chambers? Why does he recall your tan briefcase? Why does he fear you still? Delia leaned forward. That letter? It mentions my mother. Yes, Wolfe said. It states she received a payment, a bribe, thinly veiled as a restoration grant. She flushed. That's not possible. My mother didn't. She may not have known, or she was told it was a gift. Either way, the funds came from an alderman's discretionary pool and were traced by Vendramini, who never filed the report. Keene stepped forward. You have no idea what you're tampering with. I rose. Wolfe didn't move. You tried to erase a man. You succeeded, but not his words. Keene turned toward the door. It burst open. Inspector Kramer stood in the foyer, warrant in hand. Behind him, Sergeant Stebbins flanked 2 patrolmen. Kramer's voice was calm. Dominic Keene, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and the unlawful suppression of municipal records. Keene froze. Stebbins stepped in. Hands out, counsel. Keene's shoulders rose, but the fight had gone. He extended his wrists. I'll have you disbarred, he hissed. You'll have time, Kramer muttered, securing the cuffs. Delia stared, motionless. Beatrice watched Keene as if seeing him for the first time. Wolfe nodded to me. Archie. I walked over, collected the Olivetti case from beside the fireplace and opened it. Inside, the ribbon, the carbon sheets, the confession pages match, faint impressions pressed into the wax. Kramer scanned it. You don't miss a trick, Wolfe. No, Wolfe said. Nor do I repeat them. Stebbins ushered Keene out. The front door shut. Quiet returned. Thane set the page gently on the tray table. I'll speak with the press in the morning. You will speak carefully, Wolfe said. I always do. Wolfe didn't dignify it. Beatrice clasped her hands. My husband died trying to do the right thing. Yes, Wolfe said. She stood. Thank you. He bowed his head slightly, escorted her to the door. Outside, snow had begun to fall again. When I returned, the fire had dimmed. Wolfe was still seated, arms folded. Delia stood near the orchid shelf, her profile lit by lamplight. She didn't speak. Wolfe addressed her without looking up. You may have suspected, but now you know. She turned. He destroyed people. Wolfe's voice was quiet. He preserved himself, at cost to others. Thane remained seated, fingers steepled. Do you believe there are more? There always are, Wolfe said. But not tonight. Delia moved to the table and picked up the confession. She studied it as though it might vanish. It's strange, she said, to see truth on a page and know it cost someone their life. Truth is rarely free, Wolfe replied. I crossed to the sideboard and poured coffee. One for Wolfe, one for me, one left untouched. Kramer re-entered, this time with less ceremony. He removed his coat, glanced at Wolfe, and said, He'll talk. Wolfe grunted. He knows the game's up. The typewriter, the judge's statement, the warehouse ledger, all of it lines up. We'll put the suicide clerk back on the books as a homicide. Wolfe accepted the coffee and sipped. Let the facts do the lifting. Kramer sat across from him. The mayor won't like this. He may grow to appreciate it, Wolfe said, once the city finds cleaner shoes. Thane chuckled. Delia set the page down. I think I'd like to go now. Archie? Wolfe gestured. I nodded, took her coat, and walked her to the hall. She paused before the door. He was kind, you know, before all this. Keen, or he seemed to be. That's how they do it, I said. Seems comes first. She offered a faint smile, took the knob, and slipped out. I returned to the office. Wolfe spoke again. You'll deliver the rest to the Gazette in the morning. Typed. Copy? I asked. He frowned. No, the original. Let them feel its weight. Kramer raised an eyebrow. You're giving it to the papers? It belongs to the public, Wolfe said. Kramer tapped his hat against his knee. That's rare generosity from you. No, Wolfe said. It's rare prudence. A buried confession breeds rot. Air is preferable. The fire popped. I sat. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Thane broke the silence. He used to say truth was like type, fixed and mechanical. Once struck, it cannot be unstruck. Wolfe looked up, and yet, he said, many try. Kramer stood, stretched, and said, Well, I'll leave you gentlemen to your metaphors. I've got paperwork. He headed for the door. I followed. Stebbins is still outside, I asked. Like a gargoyle, Kramer said. We shook hands. When I returned again, Wolfe was staring into the fire. May I asked, motioning to the bottle. He nodded. I poured him a splash of sherry. He didn't drink it. I waited. Finally, he spoke. They forged silence, with ribbon, spacing, and fear, until one man struck the wrong key. I said, Yes. The confession page still sat on the tray. It no longer felt like paper. It felt like closure. Kramer stood by the door with his coat half buttoned, the warrant folded in his hand like a final note on a tired piano. Dominic Keene, his composure thinned to tissue, was still seated in the red chair, his eyes darting between the yellow upholstery Wolfe filled and the document in Kramer's grip. I'd rather not use cuffs in your house, Wolfe, Kramer said, not looking away from Keene. But I'll do it, Wolfe exhaled. Not a sigh, but the precise end of an unambiguous paragraph. You needn't. He will comply, Wolfe murmured. Mr. Keene is, despite recent endeavours, still a creature of public appearances. Archie stood behind Keene's shoulder, arms folded. The tension in the room had all the taste of gunmetal and wet wool. Keene rose slowly. His voice cracked. "I want my counsel." "You'll have him," Kramer said. In holding, Keene turned, adjusting his tie like a man hoping the knot might rescue him. Wolfe lifted one finger. "Inspector," he said without inflection, "do be certain the internal documents retrieved from Judge Marrow's envelope are not misfiled." Kramer gave a grunt that might have passed for agreement in another decade. Then he led Keene out. No cuffs, but no ceremony either. The door clicked shut. Silence fell with finality. Wolfe's gaze moved, not to Archie, but to the silver tray. Fritz had placed beside the beer, roast duck with saffron glaze, Archie said. "Fritz is proud, as he should be," Wolfe muttered, easing back in the yellow chair. He took one bite, deliberate. The duck yielded. He nodded. "Acceptable, Archie." Leaned against the doorframe. "So that's it then? Case closed?" "No." Wolfe sipped his beer. "Case resolved." I waited. He rarely clarified. Wolfe swallowed, his tone lower now. Silence can be honest, but never innocent. The clock chimed 7. Outside, dusk melted into fog. The room dimmed, shadows folding over the oak panels like gloves drawn over secrets. Archie moved toward the desk. "You ever going to write this one up?" Wolfe closed his eyes. "No." I looked at him. The yellow chair swallowed his shape like a wax, figure lit by firelight. "You don't want the credit?" Wolfe opened his eyes. Slow. "Keene's fool will serve, not my name." A long pause. "Some crimes," I said, "age like paper." He didn't respond. But Wolfe, he never fades. The fire cracked once. Somewhere below, Fritz washed a pan. Stayed there, the lamplight softening every edge of the room I'd known for years. Wolfe lifted his fork again. I watched him eat, and for a brief, weightless moment, the world outside didn't matter. Wolfe finished the duck in methodical silence. Not rushed, not bored, only thorough, like a man closing a drawer one finger at a time. When the final bite was gone, he dabbed his lips with the linen napkin and set it aside with the same precision he applied to crime scenes. "Archie." I turned from the window. "Yes, sir. Tomorrow you will call Lon Cohen. He'll want it packaged, but not dressed." "Meaning no embroidery," I said. "No lies," he replied. I walked to the drinks cabinet, poured a brandy, and offered. Him one. He declined. I poured mine anyway. "You're not even smug," I said. Wolfe arched one brow. Smugness is wasted on clarity. I sat down, glass in hand. "Do you think Keene ever expected it to catch him?" "No," Wolfe said. "Men of that class believe shadows are currency. They barter silence, not truth." "And Vendramini?" I asked. "You think he expected to die for what he typed?" Wolfe didn't answer immediately. Vendramini understood the value of a single mark, of spacing. He died for grammar. I sipped the brandy. The fire hissed. As a log shifted, "Do you believe in justice?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes opened again. "I believe in order." I smiled, thin. "Same thing?" "No." He reached for the orchid journal on the stand beside him and turned a page without looking. Down. His fingers found the margin, traced it once. Then, softly, "But it will suffice." The room was very quiet. Across the office, Fritz stepped in. He carried a tray with coffee, his movements precise but unhurried. He served Wolfe first, then me. When he exited, he left behind the faintest scent of nutmeg. "Archie," Wolfe said. "Yes, I will not discuss this case again." Noted. He took a sip, closed the orchid journal, and let it rest on the armrest of the yellow chair. "You've already written it in your way," he said. "Not in ink," I replied. "In your bones," Wolfe said. We sat. The fire dimmed. Somewhere, in the pipes, winter groaned its old complaint. I thought of the ribbon, the margin spacing, the ghost of a missing semicolon that had cracked the case like bone under heel. I looked at Wolfe, haloed in amber. He didn't fade, not with time, not with silence, not even with death. He simply was. The man in the yellow chair, enduring, immovable, and always watching. I leaned back. Outside, the fog thickened, curling through Manhattan like a rumor. I watched it until my coffee cooled, and then I wrote nothing at all.